Hello. Today we are going to be doing our introduction to basic probability. So we're going to do a little bit of a recap of what we've already been talking about in probability and what you know from Junior Cert. Some of what you know from Junior Cert. So the probability of something happening, so we'll say an event A, so the probability of A happening is equal to the number of ways of getting A divided by the total number of possible outcomes. So if A was, say, getting a 3 when you roll a dice, that would be, there's one way of getting a 3 when you roll a dice divided by the total number of possible outcomes, which would be 6. So that's how our formula here works. And I have highlighted this formula to you a few times already in the chapter. So the probability of A happening is equal to 1, which is the total probability of all our outcomes added together, minus the probability of A not happening. So this is an extremely important formula and will form part of lots of exam questions. Now, we're going to start off by looking at page 191, question 5. And I'm doing this pretty much entirely to point out very clearly that you need to know the contents of a pack of playing cards. So you are required to know by heart the contents of a pack of playing cards. So if for some reason you don't know that, which would be perfectly reasonable, you need to learn it by heart. They will not give you the information in the exam. You must know all of the cards in a deck of playing cards pretty well to be able to answer some of the exam questions. So Google picture of a deck of playing cards or image of the different cards in a card deck and familiarize yourself with all of the different parts of the card deck, because you do need to know them by heart. They will not give it to you in the exam. So if we look at question 5, if one card is selected at random from a pack of 52 cards, what is the probability of getting a king? So if we know our deck of cards, we know that if we have our 4 suits and we have a king in each of them. So we have a total of 4 kings out of 52 cards. How many ways can I get an outcome divided by the total number of possible outcomes? How many ways can I get a king? How many cards are kings out of a total of 52? So I'm going to write down the original fraction and then I am going to simplify it. So I put that in my calculator, or I do it in my head, and I get 1/13 as my probability. And probabilities are always going to be given as fractions or decimals, and they must always be less than 1, because the total of all of our probabilities added together must sum to 1. So a probability can't be more than 1, and it can't be less than 0. So if we ever get a number greater than 1 or a number less than 0, we know we've made a mistake in a probability question. Now, part 2 of question 5. What's the probability of getting a diamond? I know that I have my 4 suits and one of them is a diamond. So another way of looking at it would be that I have 13 diamond cards out of a total of 52, which simplifies to a quarter. So always write it out as clearly as you possibly can when you're doing these questions. And you can see the notation I am using, P brackets my outcome. You can write diamond or king if you want. You know my handwriting, so I tend to abbreviate things. Now, part 3. What is the probability of getting a picture card? So, probability of picture. And for a moment here I have to pause and think through what are my picture cards. I have a jack is a picture card, a queen is a picture card, and a king is a picture card. Importantly, aces aren't. Aces often have pictures on them, but they are not considered picture cards. So I have a total of 3 picture cards from each of my suits, and I have 4 suits, so that means I'm going to be multiplying by 4, so I have a total of 12 picture cards in my entire deck. So that means I have 12 cards out of my 52 are going to be picture cards, and when I simplify that I get 3 out of 13. There's more than one way to argue out these questions. I'm giving you the one that I think is going to guarantee you most marks in terms of thinking things through in your exam. Now, part 4, what's the probability of getting a black queen? So, probability question, we have to think about what meets this criteria. So the card must be black, that means we're dealing with spades or clubs, and we have one queen in each of those suits. So the probability of getting a black queen is going to be 2 out of 52. So it could be the queen of spades or the queen of clubs. There's only 2 of them. So when we simplify that down, we get 1 out of 26. Part V. We have an even number on the card. This one I strongly recommend in the exam you write down all the numbers on the cards, remembering that there is no number 1 card. In some games you take ace to be the number 1, but we do not consider that in our leaving cert for one reason or another. Write out all of the number cards. There's an even number, there's an even number, there's an even number, there is an even number, and there is an even number. So I have 5 even numbered cards in each suit. I have 4 suits, so I have a total of 20 cards that have even numbers on them. So my probability of even is going to be 20 out of 52, which is going to be 5 out of 13. You need to draw out stuff like this when you're trying to figure these questions. Do not attempt to do it in your head. The chances of making a mistake under exam pressure are very high. So tell yourself the story. Explain to yourself what you're doing when you're figuring out these questions. And using this notation will help you keep track of what you're doing in the questions. So that's question 5.